Well, I do welcome Nat Keohane. Nat is really one of the great movers for many, many years. He is the president of the Center for Climate, Energy, and Solutions. I met him. You were at the Environmental Defense Fund, right?
Yes,
and then,
that's right.
And then I knew his parents.
Everybody says that, unfortunately.
I mean, it's just, he has two of the most famous academic parents of all time. And they were, one of them was a mentor of mine. So I just want to say, I knew both, and I think I had a dinner at the French ambassador's. We're back to name dropping in Washington, but I had a dinner at the French ambassador's residence, and I was, had Nana, your mom, at this, and then I was like going, God, I just interviewed your son. Like, it was so cool. You've gotten older.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's great.
Wait. You are a chevalier of France.
Yeah, I didn't know what the word meant when I got the award, but yeah, I'm a chevalier in the Legion of Honor in France. So thank you. Who was clapping? I love you guys. Okay, great. Let's talk after, okay? There's a whiskey bar over here. Anybody that, when the French ambassador called me and said, "Steve, we want to decorate you as a chevalier," and I said, "You can whatever you want. I'm happy to do for you. But I mean, what do I have to wear?" But anyway, it was a kind of a nice thing. But good to see you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you've heard a little bit of our discussion, but we're talking about really I loved how Barbara Humpton started this discussion saying, we're in the precipice of a lot of massive change. It sort of feels like you're on the edge of a new industrial revolution. And in my book, there are always hard choices. You can get things wrong, you can get things right. You've been thinking about the environmental dimensions of change for a long time. So let me just start out, in a non-optimistic way. What are you most worried about?
That's tough for me because I'm always looking for the optimistic piece. But it is. But
you're
I'll take you up on it.
You're like next to Barbara.
As long as you promise.
By the way, she's leaving in a few minutes, not because she dislikes you.
I won't take it personally. But as long as we get to the optimism. Yeah. So I'll just say one thing quickly on the change that you mentioned. So I'm on the board of the Electric Power Research Institute, which is the sort of research arm, sibling of EEI. It's not the same thing as the trade. But I joined about 2 or 3 years ago. In my first board meeting, it was all, boy, we're facing flat or declining demand. How are we managing this sort of industry where, the demand is flat as far as the eye can see, and it was kind of, nobody really knew what the vitality was going to be. And then almost
was one
overnight,
of them the CFO at Siemens, who's no longer there?
Right, no, yeah, good. But, almost overnight, the conversation in the electric power industry changed. As you all have been hearing today, from, boy, it's flat demand or declining demand to it's just a rocket ship that's taking off. And so I think, to your point, it has totally changed the conversation in the power sector. So I will but if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, and maybe this will feed into, I know hopefully we'll talk about policy and so on, but if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it is that we don't get the right changes in place on policy. We don't make it easier to build the transmission we need, the interconnects we need, the permitting and siting. We can talk about what happened this summer. I'd love to talk about that, but we don't have enough support for the clean, zero carbon, carbon-free power that we need. And we end up meeting this moment by ramping up some of the fossil, in particular the coal, some of the coal plants that are still on the grid. I think that's a low probability.
Price of coal is
but it's
high.
not impossible. I know, but if we can't figure out how to really make sure we're building enough
But the price of coal is high because of the demand.
Yes,
I mean, that's
right.
That's what's happening. Barbara, I want to give you an opportunity before we send you off with great thanks for all of this to share your thoughts on the nexus of environment and to pose a question to our friend here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually had an employee ask the question, should I be running my prompts, or do I need to be mindful about the impact that's having on the environment? What should I tell her?
I mean, I may be like the rest of you. I always use the -AI just because I want to get through that and get to my search when I'm searching on Google.
Oh,
but
no.
I don't do it. I don't do it for. I guess what I would say is, I think, look, whatever is meeting her needs, right? And I wouldn't stay up at night thinking, oh my gosh, I'm contributing to this demand. I think, there may be some small things that sort of individual action can help with, but the way we're really going to solve this problem is through changing the policy structures we have, changing the frameworks we have, investing in innovation. So I wouldn't have her, stay up at night if she's using AI and she finds it worthwhile. I'm more focused on what do we do in Washington and elsewhere to clear the way.
And like what Josh said, use it. Let's get there faster.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
So with that, let's give a big round of applause to Barbara Humpton, President and CEO of Siemens USA. I'll say that Siemens and Whitehall, my company, I'm the CEO of, I'm going to have been doing this partnership around the country Thank you. And it's just been fantastic. We've had these great conversations all over the country, dealing with this and to try to deal with in a realistic way what the hard choices are. I love that you talked about the policy framework. I live in Washington. I've seen us screw up a lot of things. We're screwing up a lot every day. And so what do we have to most get right? I mean, I'm interested in what would destroy this vision and not make it happen. I'm interested in the geostrategic race that's out there and why it's important. And I'm interested in the fact that if there were elements of this that didn't come forward, like we didn't bring on the power to have this, what are the consequences of that, Nat?
Yeah, so let me state what I think the challenge is in a nutshell, and I know you've been hearing from a lot of folks about growth and so on. It is all of that growth that I think people have been hearing about. It's all of that concentrated power demand on a grid that wasn't built for it and we haven't invested in a long time.
How would you grade the grid?
But doing it in a way that maintains affordability and that continues to reduce carbon emissions. Because what I think about every day is the climate and how we protect the climate and get to a thriving low carbon economy. So I think there are three things. I'll preface this by saying what we got that people don't realize this last summer. So that's a policy win that people don't realize we had, and then three things we need to do. So the win we don't realize, and I don't want to sugarcoat it because we lost a lot if you were following the reconciliation law and you were thinking about it from a clean energy or climate world. We lost a lot. The wind and solar tax credits that had been in the Inflation Reduction Act got really gutted, as did EV tax credits. That was the headline, and I don't want to sugarcoat that. For the environment and for climate, that was a bad outcome. But here's the thing that nobody has, I think, focused enough on. What we preserved, and this is a Republican Congress that had 0 votes in 2022 for any of this. We came in with 0, and what we preserved in Republican Congress were a range of things, including the tax credits for all of the carbon-free electricity we're going to need to really meet the rising demand over time. Battery storage, advanced nuclear, geothermal, all the other carbon-free technology, along with advanced manufacturing. So we lost a lot, but we gained we preserved a core bit that's going to be important going forward. So now I think there are 3 things we need to do if we think about time horizons. Number one, as soon as possible, we're working on it. I run an NGO called the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, as Steve said. We work a lot with companies. We mobilize companies, and we're the climate voice, and they're the economic messengers, and we mobilize them for good climate and energy policy in D.C. The thing we're working on right now is permitting. And when people say permitting in Washington, they mean a whole slew of things. They mean basically making it easier to build clean energy and the clean energy infrastructure that we need to meet the moment in terms of power demand, largely. So some of that is siting and permitting and make it easier. Don't take 10 years or 7 years to build a clean energy facility or a clean energy source. Get it done much sooner. And the other thing is building the transmission we need. I think you can we won't go into the details, you can do that in different ways for different regions that meets different regional needs, but you can still build much more. So that's number one, build the transmission. Number 2 is invest in innovation, because we're going to need new forms of carbon-free power. The good news in the short run, right now, it's often the quickest thing is to build solar plus storage. And what everyone's worried about is the price, but more than the price, they're worried about quick to connect. How quickly can I build the electrons? Over time, we're going to need new forms like small modular reactors for nuclear, like geothermal, new forms of baseload generation, always on. And that's where we need innovation. I know you have a third,
but how is our science and research ecosystem in this space? Is it weathering the moment?
Well, so that's where there's going to be an opportunity. That's the flip side of the challenge, right? Right now, we know that I think the administration has really withdrawn a lot of the investments and funding in basic research, the things that make the Department of Energy work, not just the grant programs and so on. But that means there's going to be an opportunity in 3 years or 7 years, but I think in 3 years, actually, regardless, there's going to be the opportunity to rebuild that and to do that in a way that doesn't just go back to what it looked like a year ago, but is really build a DOE and a whole infrastructure for science and research that is fit for purpose.
So I interrupted you before you got to your third point.
Yeah, the third one just really quickly, and this is looking further ahead, but
aren't you happy I remembered you had a third point?
I appreciated that. So, I'm an economist. I think a lot about how do we use markets to create incentives that drive decarbonization and let the market and private actors do what they do best, which is make decisions. Right. So we haven't talked about market policies for a little while in Washington, but with energy demand rising, electricity growing, I think in a couple of years when we're back to talking about opportunities for bipartisan, I think a clean energy standard that's a market-based way to address emissions in the power sector could be a powerful approach. And so that's further down the line.
I want to broaden the conversation, invite, I mean, I don't know if you guys hang out together, whether you like each other, whether you're allowed to be on the same couch together, but Chris Phelan is Vice President of Domestic Policy at the National Association of Manufacturers. Chris, come join this conversation. Meet Nat Keohane. And thank you very much. Let's give Chris a round of applause for joining us here. We're going to get to the drink soon, but Chris, I love the way, the systematic way in which Nat just sort of talked about the challenges. You're at NAM. You know, we're seeing a lot of focus on the manufacturing sector and coming back. To tell you a little bit about our guest, Chris, he worked with Kristen Sinema in the Senate, and he's known as the sort of permitting czar, you know, the guy who helped do a lot of permitting reform. And permitting comes up all the time. And so I'm interested in kind of understanding, if I've got both of you, you know, your big manufacturing and your big climate energy solutions, is there a hybrid child of you that's going to live happily ever after, you know? Like, how do you bridge these things between, you know, NAM, climate, and doing these, and also looking at AI coming in as an optimizer in all of this? So your quick thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a big question for some quick thoughts, but I think that there is definitely a hybrid. Our companies are the companies that are driving this innovation, that are creating everything that we're talking about. I think it's really important to note and remember that manufacturing kind of drives everything that we're talking about here, from efficient water coolers to the servers and the semiconductors to the copper, the steel, the aluminum, the cement, the digital twins. Everything that goes into what we're talking about here has its genesis in manufacturing ultimately.
So, answer Barbara's questions. How constrained are you by tariffs, by inputs, by what Ann Clausen was talking about, you know, critical material supply? How many of these are choke points we should be really worried about?
Yeah, I think it depends on which one you're talking about. You know, I'll frankly steer clear from tariffs right now. We support common sense trade policy, and I don't want to get too far afield of my colleagues on tariffs and trade policy. But I think, to get back to permitting reform and what we're talking about here, there is a really good and clear sustainability story that I think has been missed around permitting reform. You know, there are transmission lines, like we're talking about, that are going to be subject to the same exact statutes that have been used to hold up oil and gas infrastructure in the past. Now, we support all of those. Like we've said before, we need everything online to get AI to where we think it can go, to outcompete China. And also, remember, manufacturers are a huge user of power on the grid as well, and it's important that we don't get into a position where there's a competition for scarcity of electricity. And then that comes down to your question of critical materials and inputs. Permitting reform is going to be absolutely essential to all of that, to bringing on new mines, but there's, not to get too in the weeds, but when you're talking about critical minerals, everyone thinks about, oh, we're just going to go, you know, build a copper smelter and get all of these EMs out of it. No, each one has its own specific way of being smelted, of being refined, of being sold into the market, and China has a complete stranglehold on that, and that's something where permitting reform, I think, driving not just the mines, but that middle mile of the critical materials is going to be really important, and it will extend out to the electricity infrastructure and the energy infrastructure that we need as well.
Nat?
Yeah, I'll give you a concrete example of maybe the hybrid, which is something actually I think we're very aligned on right today, and this is in the permitting space. It's just a toehold, but it's actually more important than it sounds. I'll describe it. There's something called the E-Permit Act that was introduced by Representative Dusty Johnson on the Republican side and by Representative Scott Peters. Yep, Representative Dusty Johnson out of South Dakota and Representative Scott Peters from California. We actually did some of the kind of behind-the-scenes work to encourage them to work together. It builds on things that Representative Johnson and others had done before. What it does is basically, it says you got to put all the federal permitting processes online, make them all digital. It sounds like a no-brainer, is a no-brainer. A very simple step. It's only the first step to solving things. The reason I mention it is because we went around, got a lot of folks to sign on a letter, everybody from American Rivers and the Nature Conservancy to National Association of Manufacturers and API, because there's a wide range of folks that say we've got to make it easier to build energy infrastructure, and one way that starts is with transparency. The last thing I'll say just on this, it sounds like a simple thing and it sounds like a no-brainer, and it is, to put everything online, but it's also a potential unlock when you start to think about things like community engagement, stakeholder engagement, which is something we care a lot about and a lot of our colleagues on the left care about, if you make everything online, right away you provide a platform and an opportunity to do that. That resolves a lot of the problems that concerns people have, and I think it'll open up the pathway for more comprehensive permitting.
Thank you. And let me ask you, Chris, and both of you, in the minutes we have before we break into a fantastic reception, I am really interested in your reactions. And I've known your work for a very long period of time, and you've been a real hero, I think, in the environmental side. But how do you feel? I mean, does the president's AI action plan seem compelling? Does it have all the right pieces in it? What is it missing? How does it deal with some of the science ecosystem, but how does it hit the environment? Chris?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. I think we at the NAM think it's very compelling. There's obviously a lot of other AI action plans that are out there. Senator Kelly just put one out.
It's very holistic. It has
it's very holistic.
I've read it.
It incorporates actually a lot of what we have been talking about for the last 2 years, from workforce development, which we're not going to have enough time to talk about, making sure that small and medium manufacturers have the ability to access and the know-how to use AI in their own facilities, because obviously we're all kind of thinking on the big scale here, but frankly the vast majority of our membership is small and medium manufacturers who could really benefit from the quality control, the cost savings, the innovation that comes with AI. But I do think also the permitting reform pieces of the president's action plan were quite compelling, and we're actually going to be coming out with kind of our own 4-pager that goes even deeper into what we've been talking about. When we say permitting reform, again, it could mean any of 10 or 20 statutes, and so we're actually going to talk about that.
Do you dream about permitting reform?
Yes, actually.
I thought you might. Nat, what are your thoughts on the AI action plan?
Maybe I'll take a slightly different tack, which is to come back to an earlier theme that you raised about we've got all this AI. What does AI help out with on the optimization side?
Right.
I was thinking when I was thinking about that when you asked that earlier. I was thinking about that great quote from Homer Simpson. So to paraphrase Homer Simpson, I decided I think artificial intelligence is the cause of and solution to all of the electric power sector's problems. At least I think at least we have one Simpsons fan in the audience. But the point is that I think it's creating all this demand for power. It's creating this huge energy demand. But it also is creating these opportunities, including on things like permitting reform, to radically simplify that. You can take something that used to take 9 months or a couple of years in terms of doing a study for interconnection, run it through AI, and do it in 45 minutes. Varun Sivaram, who is in the Biden administration, really brilliant guy, runs something called Emerald AI that's figuring out.
We had him here in town.
So there are great ways to be using the technology to also figure out how you moderate the power demand. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity not only to think about, well, how do we manage this demand growth, but how do we use this technology to optimize it and make better use of the system we have?
But I'm going to ask one last. Who has a burning question before we open the whiskey bar? Do you have a burning question? Bring this man the mic, because I don't even know him, but he's front row guy. But we're going to get to it in just a second. I want to ask you about something else we've been sort of flirting with, but I'm not sure we've gotten as deep a dive as we should. And that is, what does industrial AI look like, feel like? Can you help our audience understand what industrial AI is going to bring and what it's going to feel like? What are we going to achieve in that? And why is it important? Chris?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think Barbara touched on a lot of it, kind of what's happening right now around digital twins, and automation goes back all the way to the 80s. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on right now, taking kind of digital twins to its next step. So digitalization of the entire shop floor, putting sensors in kind of everything. I think they used to call it the economy of things or something like that. And that a vast amount of data can actually help optimize production processes, alert you when you need to fix something before you would otherwise know. There's something called machine vision, which one of our members is using that to sort packages, but also it can be a really compelling use case for kind of quality control that humans just physically can't see or do. Right. So as you're turning out a ton of product, and AI can scan and make sure you're getting the right thing or incoming the right thing. There's a ton of other examples out there. We have a great white paper that runs through all of these, what it means for the workforce, what it means for the shop floor, what it means for the consumer. I would point everyone there, because I know I don't have enough time.
Are people still in the picture?
People are definitely still in the picture. It's not like a wholesale
So
replacement
the
of
future
everyone.
still needs us?
Yeah, the future still needs us. Manufacturers are committed to having a people-centric business model going forward, but these are things that, as everyone has said, are going to be able to augment what humans are able to do and innovate already. I think about it in material sciences. I think about it in clearing the interconnection queue.
Right.
There's just a ton of different ways where if it can save you,
Right.
a couple minutes or hours, that adds up.
I want to go to James because I've been watching him the whole time, and you've been very engaged. You've been an active listener, and so I don't even know why you're here or who you are, but I'm going to give you a chance to make a comment. But James?
Hi, I'm James. I was interested in the concept of, if you look at Texas, for example, having its own power system separate to the country, how does AI come into that? And do you think that could be something to accelerate learning from, or does it keep separated, for example, or does it have to integrate with the bigger system? That's one of the questions.
Great. So AI and what we've seen in Texas and the power system. So Nat.
I mean, it's a great question. I wish I knew more about how AI has been used in Texas. I think what I would take from the Texas experience, if you look at where it's been successful, one thing that it's been very successful at in Texas is building lots of new clean energy and lots of energy generally and putting it onto the grid. Now, I think it probably would be better off if they connected to some of the rest. We saw that with Storm Uri a while ago. But I think learning from that speed, and I don't think they've been doing that yet with AI, but that's the kind of thing when we talk about shortening the interconnection permitting, we're talking about really dramatically shortening the time in other parts of the country that it takes to get clean energy on or energy infrastructure on, and that would be the lesson I would take.
My team, whoever has the mic, give John DeBoer the mic here for a minute. I'm going to go back to him for a second, but I would love to get your thoughts on that.
I think Texas, it surprised a lot of people how great they have done this summer in particular and how much they have learned. I think coming from the Hill very recently,
But one summer is one summer, right?
One summer is one summer,
trend.
but I could say connecting ERCOT into the rest of the country, you can kind of probably put that aside for the time being. That's just not a political reality.
Right.
But I think that they've done a great job of integrating batteries and kind of showing the way forward. Again, I'm not sure how AI has been used in that, but they have clearly been able to flatten the curve, and the cost and demand trajectories have really not gone crazy out of whack, and it's just been very impressive, honestly.
Look, I just want to ask John in his, because we were in Dallas together in Texas, and we had really an outstanding array of characters that are on every dimension of what we're talking about today, from data centers to innovators to the technology folks. We had, of course, Siemens involved, but you also had essentially a backdrop of a lot of the things that needed to be fixed. We had Encore, the head of strategy. And so I want to ask John, from our time in Dallas, my sense was there's an urgency to get this right and to use these new tools and techniques and to invest quickly and build out fast. And the thing that stuck out for me is how focused that whole system was. The Dallas meeting that we had really impacted me because you felt this muscular urgency to move. And I have to say, I'm not sure I feel the muscular urgency everywhere in the country. But John, I want to go to you to see if I got it right, and you can tell me where I'm wrong.
No, I would probably just expand on some of the points that you were making. So one of the powerful things that's happened more recently in the Texas market, and it really, I think, links several of the themes that we've talked about here today, is one, Texas, from a regulatory perspective, started to look at this power problem. And they said, well, we don't have the answer, but may the best person win. And if you want to win in the world of AI and data centers, if you find ways of bringing your own power, if you find ways of participating in the market, then we can accelerate your connection to the grid. That was a different perspective and view than certain parts of the country where it was like congested, it was throttled, and things had gotten behind. So this was one motion. I think that the other thing that happened in the Texas market was a little bit of go fast and we'll find it along the way. And so one of the things that stuck out to me from our conversation in Texas was that of the 170 gigawatts that were targeted to be added to the Texas grid, which when we say that kind of number, 1 gigawatt equals the electricity of San Jose or Munich in Germany. So we
I
talk
wish
about-
people would say that more often because I have no idea what. I mean, I was talking to these guys from TerraFlow or whatever. I don't know what a gigawatt is. I mean, those. Thank you. So just one of those is San Jose for like one night or a year.
No, that is the peak power, and it needs to be there like it needed to be for
I
a
see.
city. So when you picture what's happening in the market, that's the scale of what's happening. And a part of what's unpacking in the Texas market is not all of that will connect, and so it might ultimately be 5 to 10% of that will survive the grid and the interconnect process.
Right.
But when that happens, it will still add 20 San Jose's to the grid for data centers in the next 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
So that's kind of the scale of change that's happening right now.
So thank you so much for answering James's question as well. So Chris, as we finish up here and we get to drinks and reception, which I want to get into, I'd like to, I know this sounds trite, but what do you think we have to get most right to deliver on the vision that, Barbara Humpton of Siemens sort of helped paint the picture of? What do you, from your perspective, your slice of light, what is your highest priority getting right?
Again, not to be trite, it's permitting reform. It has to be
Permitting reform. I had no idea you were going to say
Who would have
that.
guessed? Who would have guessed? But from everything that we've talked about here, but also to the large buildings themselves and getting access to water, like all of these things that are going to make AI for real are going to require permitting, and that, as it stands right now, there are myriad ways it can go wrong in just the kind of documentation phase, but also then you have a very, very long statute of limitations that allows pretty much anyone to challenge any project. And so to take it back to sustainability, if people think that just because a project is clean or renewable or
Right.
a transmission line connecting it, I can tell you I have dealt with scenarios where that is not correct. And so everybody needs permitting reform. China is building, again, gigawatts, terawatts almost of generation of all kinds, and we can't be on the back foot. We can't tie one hand behind our back and expect to compete with that kind of generation and innovation, frankly. So it's permitting reform, 1, 2, 3.
Nat, what do you think we need to get most right?
I mean, well, look, I think in the near term, it is permitting reform. I know that's going to, I mentioned the other things. We need to be really invested in innovation and really drive that science and research to make sure we're commercializing as soon as possible the other forms of energy that we're going to need. But that, that innovation R&D, that pays off in 2030, 2031, whatever, where we're going to need it. We're going to need that power. But I agree. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it is true. This is what we need. We just need to be building more. And I guess the only thing I would say for folks on, in a sense, on sort of the folks in my community, the NGO community, I guess when I look at it, people worry a lot. Well, if we make it easier to build infrastructure, we're going to build a lot of, fossil infrastructure and oil and gas. And I understand that concern. But right now, what I say is the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure we have today is a 20th century fossil energy infrastructure. And so that powered the country, but if you're worried about sort of a fossil fuel infrastructure, that's what we have today. And I think the economics will favor clean if we just make it easier to build. And so I think the view from the kind of climate hawk perspective is we just need to make it easier to build clean energy infrastructure, easier to build transmission and site things, and the economics of clean are going to win out. And if we're going to build a 21st century infrastructure, we gotta clear the way.
Well, look, I just want to, first of all, thank you both. I want to thank all of our speakers and thank our audience. And I'm just going to put my own editorial here. I don't think that we do enough, either on our journalism or our commentary as we're thinking and painting a picture of the future, looking at what AI can do and solve, is to kind of connect it more solidly to sustainability, addressing the climate, addressing these issues. It's sort of like, it sometimes feels like we're taking the AI world, the AI wonk world, the AI silo, and okay, now we're adding this. But there are these natural connections, in terms of looking at optimization. But that's why I love this program. I love this program that Whitehall has had the privilege of doing with Siemens, because I think that there is a very, very powerful dimension of this. But when you sit around with AI wonks in Davos, it almost never comes up, so shame on them. So I do want to say thank you very, very much, Nat Keohane. Nat, of course, is president for the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. Chris Phelan, vice president of domestic policy for National Association of Manufacturers. I want to thank Siemens very much for this partnership. And we're going to keep doing these things and doing these programs. You're now an alumni of our group, and apparently we have a whiskey bar over here that can take us to the next level, or other beverages of your choice. So thank you all very much for joining us. Let's give a big round of applause to our guests. And thank you all very much for joining us.